In my last video, I learned about the history of Canada in a very concise and interesting video. It was brilliant to learn more about this awesome country, and I'm looking forward to finding out more. And one thing I was really interested in finding out more about was the geography of the country. On that history video, I learned that just pretty much most of the landmass of Canada is like forests and mountains and almost like desolate land. And there's just big cities dotted around this huge country. And yeah, what better video to find out more about the geography of the country than the geography now for Canada. So that's what I'm going to be checking out today. Again, really looking forward to learn more about Canada, so please keep recommending different videos and different interesting topics about the country, and I'll check them out soon, but let's check this one out first.
We got over 40 people that emailed us to help out with this episode from Canada, so without further ado, here comes the Canada episode.
It's time to learn geography now!
Hey Geography peeps, I'm your host Barbie. A lot of people sometimes have trouble distinguishing between Americans from the US and Canadians. Here's a little analogy. Americans are kind of like teenage boys. They're opinionated, energetic, and confident, whereas Canadians are kind of like teenage girls. They'll be polite to you to your face, but then they'll talk crap behind your back. That being said, let's see if we can dissect the flag.
Is that true? Tell me if that's a good summation of the difference between American and Canadians. That's something I'm definitely going to be looking into further. I have another YouTube channel where I'm learning about American things as well. So as much as I am enjoying learning about America and going to be enjoying learning about Canada, I'm also very interested to know about the two countries, their differences and similarities. And tell me if you think you agree with that analysis, that initial analysis of those countries. And I'm interested to know about the flag as well.
The flag consists of a red field with a white square in the middle. In the middle of the entire flag lies a single 11-pointed red maple leaf. Red symbolizes the sacrifice during both world wars, and the white symbolizes the peace, tranquility, and neutrality of the country. The maple leaf has historically been a symbol of Canada for centuries, even during British rule. Some Canadians will tell you the 11 points symbolize the provinces, and the last one being for the territories, but that's not really true. That's just kind of how the leaf looks. Also,
okay, that is very interesting. I never knew anything about the origins of this flag. That it pays respect to the fallen of the Great Wars or the two World Wars. It's just such a fantastic show of respect and respect and just love for their memory. Like, as I said on my previous video, I'm someone who is a supporter of the armed forces and of soldiers and military professionals. I had no clue that this was for fallen soldiers. That gives me so much more respect for Canada. It was already a country I really respected, but to know that their national flag shows that respect is just unbelievable. I don't think that is many countries, if any, do that. And to have that contrast with the white for peace and tranquility is just very beautiful and meaningful as well, and very interesting. And yeah, with this vibrant and striking maple leaf, it's just very Canadian. Those little touches with the 11 provinces for the 11 tips of the maple leaf is just another great point of interest for me as well.
But that's not really true. That's just kind of how the leaf looks.
Yeah,
also, keep in mind,
if it's
Quebec
not
would much
true,
rather
then,
fly
yeah.
this flag instead of the maple leaf, but we'll discuss more about that in... Alright, so Canada is huge. It's the second largest country in the world, so it's pretty safe to say that you can bet that there's going to be a lot of interesting things when it comes to administrative divisions. First of all, Canada is located on the North American continent, right above the United States, bordered by 3 oceans, the Atlantic, the Arctic, and the Pacific on all 3 sides. The country stretches over 6 time zones and is divided into 10 provinces.
See, that's when you just actually think about the size of it, how it's covered by 3 different oceans, and especially the Arctic. Going from the Arctic down to here, it's just such a huge landmass from east to west, north to south. And you can tell why the geography would be just so different. Like, this part of the geography compared to down here must be just like almost light years away, man. So it's so different. But it's something that makes Canada very unique and very interesting to me.
Yes, people, Newfoundland and Labrador are together one province, and 3 territories in the north. The capital of Ottawa being in the province of Ontario. Ooh, now let's have some fun. Now, the thing is, Canada's domain is lavished with sovereignty enigma and semi-autonomous wonder. First of all, let's talk about the border. At over 8,800 kilometers or 5,500 miles, with thousands of markers along the way, Canada and the US have the world's longest border between any 2 countries. Things are a little...
This is something I actually heard of before, that it's the longest border between 2 countries. But for me, being from the UK, all we ever hear about is the border between Mexico and the USA, because there's always talk about immigrants like trying to enter the US. How is how does the border differ between this border and the border between Mexico and the US? Is this one as strong? Like, always hear about America talking about building a wall between the other border. Is this one super secure? How easy is it just to try like go between these 2 countries?
Little tame on the east coast, except for that one island they have a dispute with Denmark over, and that one other island within kayaking distance that France refuses to let go of, until you get to the Quebec-Vermont border, and things get a little messed up when you reach Derby Line and Stansted. Since the town was built before modern-day borders were properly established, the town has a variety of houses, businesses, and buildings that lie directly on the border. Haskell Free Library even marks the border in its reading rooms and has an...
I have never seen anything like that, so I guess that kind of answers my question to an extent, that the border, I mean, you can just go between that, so do you not need to go through passport control or anything like that? I guess not in this sort of instance, definitely not when you're going between a room, but surely there must be border points at some point. Some
for
area.
People on the US side and the Canada side. People of each country must enter on their side, and if they exit on the opposite country, they must stay on the sidewalk and report to the customs office. Failure to do so and stepping on the road can result in arrest. And this delightfully accidental slab of confusion, known as the Northwest Angle, that belongs to Minnesota, mostly owned by the Ojibwe tribe, situated on the Lake of the Woods, where you can find the reassuringly perfect getaway spots, Massacre Island and Little Massacre Island.
What is Massacre Island and Little Massacre Island, and why are they named as such?
The rest of the border tries as best as it can to cut straight on the 49th parallel, even though it zigzags a little bit, and 4 airports have runways that either straddle or are exactly parallel to the border. Somewhere around 80% of Canadians live within 100 miles or 160 kilometers to the border of the US, and the further north you go, things just get a little kind of fuzzy and neglected. They still have a little bit of trouble integrating the rest of the land the further up you go. There are only 2 main highways that lead to the Yukon and Northwest territories from the south, whereas there are virtually no roads leading to any of the provinces or territories into none of it.
Wow, that's like that. When I mentioned how desolate some parts of Canada are, I didn't really realise it was so desolate. Is there so much of Canada that's just unexplored? As I mentioned on my previous video, I'm from Scotland, so Scotland is probably like, it's like minuscule compared to Canada, so you can probably say that pretty much every square inch of it there's probably been people, or at least you can see every part of it. When there's parts like this where there's no road, have people actually even been here? It's so like, how would you even get here? Can you trek here? And the thing that is different as well with Canada having like very cold and probably treacherous at points weather, it must be so difficult to actually explore certain areas. That's what makes it interesting to me also.
The only way to get into none of it is to either fly or take a boat. I mean, technically you could walk across the border, but that would suck. Speaking of none of it, Canada has the most northerly inhabited place in the world. Alert Canada, a perpetually icy, frozen, desolate settlement typically operated by as few as 5 people year-round, functioning as both as a militaristic station and a seasonal research facility. Now, the one thing you have to know about Canada's administrative divisions is that it all kind of constitutionally fits together until you get to Quebec. Although Quebec is still considered a province of Canada, they've made it very clear in the past that they have a strong sense of Quebecois nationalism that many even take to the separatist extreme. Nonetheless, many of Canada's divisions and functions are heavily influenced by the landscape, such we will discuss in...
So yeah, tell me more about that. Being again from Scotland, like there's a huge movement for Scottish independence from the rest of the United Kingdom. Not one I agree with, to be honest. I just like the status quo and keeping low risk and not having that separation. But do people from Quebec have that? He mentioned that it's maybe not sort of nationalist thing there. Do Quebec Quebecians, I don't know what the word is, but do they want independence? Is that something that they could they believe in? How do people from Quebec differ from the rest, from other Canadians? Do they have different personalities? Is there noticeable differences between the different regions, people from the different regions around Canada also?
Okay, so once again, Canada is huge and often referred to as the Great White North. However, not all of Canada is a chilly Arctic tundra. First of all, Canada's physical features are built with a strange yet complementary mix of geological and meteorological, yes, that's a word, meteorological facets. Looking at Canada, one of the most notable features that sticks out would have to probably be the Hudson Bay, the second largest bay in the world after the Bay of Bengal, huge, and the largest bay that freezes over in winter. This bay provides a drainage basin that hydrates about half of the entire country and a little bit of the northwest of the US.
So important.
The strange thing is that the Hudson Bay actually sits on a gravitational anomaly in which gravity here is actually a little bit lower than the rest of the planet's average. It has to do with some kind of sciencey reason about ground convection and ice melt rebound, yada yada yada. Hey guys, want to lose some weight? Try the new workout and diet trend, Hudson 90X. Our diet and workout plan includes going to the Hudson Bay. No, but seriously, almost nobody lives along the Hudson Bay. It's almost impossible to build roads with the rugged, splotchy rock landscape with too many ponds and lakes getting in the way for any straight highway to be built. Speaking of which, at around 2 to 3 million, it's actually speculated that around 60% of all the world's lakes and about 30% of all the world's freshwater can be found in Canada.
That is absolutely mind-blowing for me. 60% of the world's lakes are found in Canada. Yeah, you can see like these must be all classed as lakes. It's so many small lakes. That must be like quite cool to like be from a country that has that as a like a stat. It's very
in Canada. Tap water can actually have better quality than bottled water in Canada. This has to do largely with the domineering freckly crevice zone that takes up about half of the entire country, the Canadian Shield. The Canadian Shield is a...
That's very similar to Scotland. We have like super clean drinking water. Tap water is like, when you run it cold in the winter, it's absolutely beautiful to drink.
Wide plateau of exposed Precambrian igneous rock that harbors little soil and vegetation, but offers a glory field of mining. Canada has some of the world's richest deposits of metal ores like nickel, gold, silver, and copper. 2/3 of all the cesium in the world comes from one mine in Manitoba, Burnick Lake. Fun little side note, Canada has the world's largest third-order lake island. That's an island in a lake on an island in a lake on an island. Located on Victoria Island, this little squiggly 4-acre rock was discovered by map nerds who scrolled Google Maps just a couple of years ago. The island has no name and has most likely never had anyone step foot on it. I mean, I'll do it if nobody else will, but I might need a corporate sponsorship. I'm looking at you, Aunt Jemima. Canada also has two...
That's what I mean about certain parts of Canada just having having ever been on parts of it. But I never knew there was a place like that, like a lake within an island, It's like
one of the top 10 largest impact craters on Earth.
Pretty
Sudbury Crater
mental.
in Ontario and Manicouagan in Quebec with its almost perfectly circular imprint flooded and now a reservoir that you can see from space. Okay, there's a lot more in this section, so I'm just going to kind of rapid fire throughout all the rest of the facts. About 40% of the country is covered in forests and about 1/10 of the world's forests are in Canada. Over 60% of the world's polar bears live in Canada. The Bay of Fundy has the world's highest tidal range with the highest point being over 16 meters. Niagara Falls looks cool. Mount Thor has the world's highest vertical drop. Quebec alone supplies about 70% of the world's maple syrup, and they actually...
Okay, man, wait a minute. There's so many interesting stats here. I need to hear that again. That is like... Canada has so much unique points.
Bay of Fundy has the world's highest tidal range with the highest point being over 16 meters. Niagara Falls looks cool. Mount Thor has the world's highest vertical drop. Quebec alone supplies about 70% of the world's maple syrup.
That one as well, man. I love maple syrup, so that's crazy to me that it just comes from... I know that Canada, like maple syrup, obviously is synonymous with Canada and comes from Canada, but 60% of the world's supply comes from only Quebec. It's quite mind-blowing in itself. But you see the different like things like Niagara Falls and that like large mountain there. The thing about Canada that interests me also is it's such a beautiful, diverse country with so much different types of landscapes, every type of landscape imaginable, and it's all like huge and majestic.
And they actually have a maple syrup reserve with over 222,000 barrels of maple syrup. Prince Edward Island has a weird natural phenomena in which the sands on the beach make this weird squeaking noise when you step on it. Here's some footage. The largest inland lakes besides the ones shared with the US on the Great Lakes are the Great Bear and Great Slave Lakes, named after the slavey people. No, I'm not talking about slaves, I'm talking about the slavey people. There's a difference. One we'll discuss in... Canada is one of those places where everybody kind of fits in, but there's always a little bit of gossip going around every corner. First of all, Canada has about 35 million people, making it one of the least densely populated places on Earth, about 3/4 of whom identify as white. Asians make up about 14%, natives and aboriginal peoples make up a surprising 5%, blacks at 3%, Latinos at 2%, and the rest are just kind of everything else. Now,
I didn't actually realise that the native population was so high. Actually, I asked on my previous video if there is still a native population. I think they called it First Peoples or something. I can't remember the name of it, but that 5% of Canada is actually made up of native Canadians is quite surprising to me. How are the native people? How are they treated? Is there any sort of discrimination against the native people of Canada? Similar to in the US. I only really know about the US history of Native Americans and how their land was encroached and still gets encroached on to these days, and they get treated quite discriminately. How is it? Is it different in Canada?
Of everything else. Now again, Canada's population takes another turn because in addition to ethnicity, Canada also has linguistic groups. About 1 out of every 3 Canadians either speaks French fluently or understands enough to get by. The whole Quebec thing kind of plays a paramount role in Canada's societal operations. They kind of have to work really hard to make sure that this one province cooperates. Also, keep in mind, Quebec isn't the only place in Canada where French is spoken. Communities in Ontario, Manitoba, and especially the Maritime province like Newfoundland, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia have huge communities of French speakers. The difference though is that these French speakers have an even deeper level of segregated culture. Many people in the Maritime provinces have a unique Acadian French culture that differs from Quebec. Fun side note, the Cajun people of the US in Louisiana are generally descended from the Acadian people that were expelled and deported from these provinces by the British in the 1700s. Back then, the Louisiana Purchase didn't happen yet, so all of this area was still French. Yada yada yada, they came over and invented gumbo. So that's why Cajuns speak French, America, because Canada! Nonetheless, about...
Yeah, that is also one thing I'm interested to know more about Canada is the demographics with regards to just that English-speaking side of things and the French-speaking. I said on my previous video how it's very unique that a country has such a large population speaking 2 very distinct languages that are also popular worldwide. And I want to know about the differences and similarities between these 2 different peoples. He said that the French try to maybe keep themselves to themselves a bit. Is that true? And how do they do that? Are they very fully integrated into like just normal Canadian culture? Do they have their own culture within Canadian culture? Tell me more about that.
1 out of every 5 Canadians was born outside of Canada, making Canada pretty diverse, especially by US entertainment quota standards. Alright, toss in a black guy, an Asian girl, why not throw in one of those Indian guys? Those people are trending these days, but make sure the lead is a handsome, attractive, rugged white guy. And this is where I want to make a Geography Now spotlight. Canada has a somewhat shrouded community of under-highlighted individuals that typically go unnoticed, even by Canadians. Sure, we can talk about Toronto, Vancouver, heck, even Calgary has some chips on the table, but nobody really gives these guys a chance. So Yukon, Northwest, none of it, I'm putting you guys on display. Altogether, the population of all 3 of these territories is only about 110,000 people, making it the most sparsely populated area of all of Canada.
Yeah, that's quite crazy. 110,000 people live over such an absolutely huge landmass here. Like that's very sparse, and it must create like very unique cultures within that as well.
Area of all of Canada. First of all, Indigenous peoples of Canada number about 850,000 and altogether have about 630 reservations speckled throughout the entire country. The largest reserves are located in these territories. Indigenous people in Canada are generally categorized into 3 separate groups. The First Nations, the Métis, and the Inuit. The Métis are mixed race Indigenous, the First Nations are generally southern tribes that typically live in forested areas, and the Inuit are straight up Arctic folk. Here's how you can kind of distinguish the three territories. Yukon is predominantly white. The Northwestern Territories has a lot of First Nation tribes, like the Slavey people who can be found close to the Great Slave Lake, although many of them prefer to be called the Dene. Cool side note, the Navajo tribe in the US to some extent trace their heritage to these people. See how everything is connected, people? Finally, we reach Nunavut, which is almost exclusively Inuit. The Northwest Territories and Nunavut actually used to be part of the same territory, but then in 1999, Nunavut was like, I ain't having none of it, and became its own thing. No, but seriously, Inuit culture is one of the most underrated and culturally fascinating things you'll ever encounter. They speak in Inuktitut, a cousin of the Greenlandic language. They can pretty much understand each other, and they have their own written script that you can find on street signs and traffic posts. They have a long history of vibrant traditions, rituals, games, music, and even cuisine. If you ever come here, make sure you try some whale blubber and watch a throat game song which looks like this. What a great way to make friends. Which takes us to...
Yeah, I'd definitely be interested in learning more about the native people's history and their current situation. That's very interesting, just to know the low amount of them that live in this large landmass, and it'd be really interesting just to learn more about their way of life and how things are within these cultures. Something it's very unique to Canada.
The end. Nah, okay, let's elaborate just a little bit more. Okay, so Canada does kind of typically maintain a foreign policy that does encourage diplomacy outreach to pretty much every country that they can grab at. Heck, they even had good ties with Cuba after the US put an embargo on them. Nonetheless, Canada's relations kind of typically shadow those of the US. Allies with the same allies, and opponents with the same opponents. I mean, have you seen the movie Argo? First of all, Canada is not only part of the Commonwealth, but the Commonwealth realm. Yes, there's a difference. So in general, they pretty much get along with everything that was once part of the British Empire. Then you get the Francophone countries that also gel well with Canada as well.
That's true,
the funny thing is, although the US complains about the immigration procedures of Mexicans into the US, Canada is actually trying to coerce and entice Mexicans to come in. With its low birth rate and a need for a bigger workforce to assist the aging population, Canada has relaxed its immigration and visa policies in order to gain skilled workers, and specifically from the Central American regions.
And yeah, that with regards to the opening up of the immigration procedures and encouraging immigrations, how do Canadians feel about that? Are Canadians happy that it helps the prosperity of Canada and the growth of Canada? Or are people unhappy that, you know, like the usual argument against immigrants is they take up services and they cost more to the country than they bring in? But tell me, I'd be very interested to know from people in Canada what your opinion on immigration is and immigrants themselves.
Flyers and advertisements are spread all over Mexico encouraging them to move in. Of course, when it comes to those closest to them, Canada does have their top pick. The United States. Some say Canada is like the little brother of the US, some say it's like the best friend, but in all honesty, Canada and the US are kind of like teenage high school sweethearts. Canadians and Americans have been there for each other since day one. The US is the largest export and business partner of Canada and shares the closest diplomatic ties both nationalistically and militaristically. The difference between Canadians and Americans, though, is that Americans gained their independence by force, whereas Canadians by diplomacy. American immigration policy is like a melting pot where people are kind of expected to assimilate, whereas Canadian foreign policy is kind of like a mosaic. People are encouraged to be distinct culturally. In all honesty, though, they are kind of like a cute little teenage boyfriend-girlfriend couple. Sometimes they like to poke fun at each other, but at the end of the day, they're totally dating and they're totally making out with each other in the back of the movie theaters. In conclusion, Canada, you little sweet cheek you. I'll pick you up at 7. We're going out for some pancakes on that island, in a lake, on an island, in a lake, on an island. Stay tuned.
Yeah, very, very interested to know more about the relationship between America and Canada. Two countries I really respect a lot. I really love the culture of both countries. As I learn more about the history of both of these countries and their relationship with my country being the UK, being Great Britain, I see a lot of similarities between both countries and our relationships. Two countries, yeah, I really respect, but learning more about Canada and this, there's just so much points of interest, not just with the geography, but with like the people, everything about the country. It makes me so like excited to learn more about Canada. But the thing about Quebec, I think I might make a video about Quebec. That's came up in the 2 videos I've made so far, and it's something I never really knew anything about Quebec, but it seems to have its own personality within Canada, and I'd be very intrigued to find out more about Quebec itself. But tell me what you think about this video. Tell me more about Canada. Recommend some other videos. And yeah, I'm really enjoying my journey into learning more about Canada so far. But thanks for watching. If you want to subscribe, please go ahead. Thanks.